Elsewhere across the UK, after any early mist and fog lifts gradually, there will be some sunshine, particularly in the south and around western fringes away from Northern Ireland. Temperatures up to 9 to 10 Celsius in the south, 5 to 7 in the north. So feeling a little bit colder, and that cooling trend continues. But what we're also going to see later this week is higher pressure over Scandinavia, exerting its influence over the UK, leading to drier weather, just some few showers coming in from the east, but also colder conditions.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner Today on GB News. Even if normal football leaves you a little bit cold, tonight's Home Nations derby might warm you up a bit. England take on Wales this evening in Qatar, 7 o'clock UK time. I like to think you'll be watching Nigel Farage on GB News instead, but you can at least enjoy some of the build-up this morning with me. We've got fans, we've got former players and our reporters to get a sense of the party atmosphere. We're also waiting this morning on what could be huge news for the UK's energy independence, so keep us switched on for that. And a great new panel today to talk COVID compensations, China relations and private school taxations. It's going to be a busy one. Here's Rosie with your news.
Thanks, Bev. A very good morning. 2 minutes past 10. Let's get you up to date on GB News. A section of the new online safety bill has been removed following criticism by some Conservatives that it posed a risk to free speech. The amendment means big tech, like social media sites, will no longer be required to remove harmful material if it's deemed to be legal. The online safety bill is due to return to Parliament next week after repeatedly being delayed. The Culture Minister, Michelle Donnellan, told GB News the most important part of the bill is strengthening accountability and transparency.
In terms of illegal content or also harmful content towards children, that will no longer be allowed on social media platforms. If they evade the law, then they could face fines up to 10% of their global turnover. And that is billions of pounds. That will certainly hit them where it hurts and be a strong deterrent to prevent them from acting in the way that they've done up to now, which has been putting profits before people and before children.
The Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary says Labour's concerned the change is a major watering down of the legislation.
Well, there is concern about the fact that they appear to be weakening that bill, but we certainly do need a form of online safety bill to protect people. We've seen people be driven into the most tragic of circumstances because of content that they've been able to find online. And I'm a parent, I've got two girls, an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. I mean, it actually terrifies me to think that they might be able to find horrible material, particularly at stages in their life when they are vulnerable, because we all know adolescence is a vulnerable time.
The government's confirmed the go-ahead for the new Sizewell C nuclear power plant in Suffolk, backing the scheme with a £700 million stake. Ministers say the move will create 10,000 highly skilled jobs and provide reliable, low-carbon power to the equivalent of 6 million homes for more than 50 years. The Prime Minister says the UK's golden era of relations with China is over. In his first major foreign policy speech, Rishi Sunak vowed to evolve the UK's stance towards the country during the Lord Mayor's banquet speech in London last night. He added the UK now needed to replace wishful thinking with robust pragmatism towards competitors. The number of people in England and Wales describing themselves as Christian has fallen below half for the first time. The latest data from the Office for National Statistics also showed the number of people who identify their ethnic group as white has fallen by just over 4% in the last decade to now 81.7%. The Met Police has launched a new anonymous hotline for people to report corrupt or abusive police officers. It follows a series of scandals, including the rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a serving officer. The force has come under heavy criticism over failures in both its anti-corruption and disciplinary procedures. One recent report found hundreds of corrupt officers were still in post. The government's reviewing its plans to fast-track the removal of asylum seekers who've arrived in the UK from designated safe countries. The Times reports that Home Secretary Suella Braverman is looking to resurrect a Labour policy creating a list of countries deemed to be safe. Asylum seekers of citizens from countries on the list would be regarded as unfounded. A review into the clinical records of 44 patients who died under the care of a former neurologist has found a failure of care and potentially thousands more people could be impacted. The review follows a recall of 2,500 outpatients who were treated by Dr Michael Watt at the Belfast Health Trust in 2018. The Royal College of Physicians found that treatment was unnecessary and invasive. Hundreds of thousands more homes could be at high risk of flooding in the coming decades, according to the National Infrastructure Commission. Its report says the dual impact of climate change and urbanisation is causing the problem. It's calling for £12 billion of investment to protect the 600,000 homes that could be at risk in England. The organisation is calling for £12 billion of investment in drainage systems and stricter controls on property developments. A new injunction granted by the High Court could see Just Stop Oil activists face fresh penalties for demonstrating on the M25. National Highways say it's secured the civil order to prevent unlawful protests on the country's busiest motorway. Members of the environmental group have caused major traffic disruption in the past few months. It's all to play for tonight in Qatar as England and Wales go head-to-head in the final match of Group B. To get through to the knockouts, Wales must beat England and hope the USA draw with Iran. Meanwhile, Gareth Southgate's side are looking to bounce back from their draw with the US and qualify top of the group. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Bev.
Very good morning. You are watching and listening to Bev Turner today on GB News, TV, radio and online. Now, if you haven't been feeling the World Cup so far, especially after that England-America game, that was a bit flat, wasn't it? Well, this evening's match between Wales and England will surely warm you up for all the action that's going to be ahead. The clash takes place at 7 o'clock. I say watch Nigel Farage instead at the time, but we're going to bring you all the build-up throughout the day here on GB News. Former Wales goalkeeper Neville Southall and England defender Danny Mills are going to be joining me on the show to help people like me get in the mood. And also today, the Business and Energy Secretary Grant Shapps is launching a major package of investment to secure the UK's energy independence this morning. It includes a commitment to nuclear power. It's all part of the forthcoming Energy Security Bill. We're going to be talking about that. And how do you feel about the 4-day working week becoming normal? 100 UK companies have signed up for the working pattern for all their employees with no loss of pay. Apparently, the 5-day working week is outdated. Or is everyone just getting lazier? Let me know what you think. Don't forget to vote in our poll. Today we're talking about our energy independence. On Twitter, we are asking you, do you support nuclear energy? We're going to be having an expert on explaining the pros and cons this morning. I don't really know how I feel about it. Make yourself heard on @GBNews. Now, it all comes down to the wire tonight as England takes on Wales for the first time ever at the World Cup. Who knew? Well, joining us now from Doha is our reporter, Paul Hawkins. I can't wait to talk to Paul. I always love these images of Paul. He's out there in the sunny climes of Qatar. And we're going to be talking to him in just a moment. Where are you, Paul? Are you there?
Bev.
Hello, Paul. We can hear you now. A few technical delays there. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Hot. Although not as hot as we normally are, to be honest. It's only 29 degrees here and there's actually some cloud in the sky, so it's not feeling too hot. But it's going to be considerably cooler when England and Wales take on each other later on, 10 o'clock local time. And by then we'll also know who they'll face in the next round should they qualify, because before that Netherlands, Senegal and Ecuador and Qatar, who were knocked out, are playing their matches. That one's at 3 o'clock your time, 6 o'clock Qatar time. But yeah, England taking on Wales. They've met 103 times since 1879. This one easily and by far the biggest. It was always going to be big anyway when they were meeting at the World Cup, but the fact that Wales have to win to stay in the group to qualify for the next round, and the fact that England they should qualify, they only need a point, but also need to make up for that disappointing performance against the USA, adds even more pressure on this fixture. Gareth Southgate, though, knows that Wales will be up for this, given the fact it's a British derby.
From being out there, Paul, do you think there are more English fans or more Welsh fans out in Qatar, or is it about the same?
We know that before the tournament there are sort of a couple of thousand more England fans than Wales, about 2,000 or 3,000 Wales fans travelling over here, about 3,000 or 4,000 England fans. So we know that there are more English than Welsh here. But frankly, you couldn't tell if you were just walking around here at the moment. Wales fans are everywhere, England fans are everywhere, and the mood is pretty good actually. It's still early on here, it's still very hot. Some Wales fans, some England fans have taken up some of those packages where they can go to some of the hotels here, some of the fan zones, and for sort of 80 quid get 5 pints and a meal. So some have done that, but others have just come here and they're just having a coffee and milling about, mixing with the other fans as well, the other Senegal, Ecuador, Qatar and Netherlands fans that are knocking around here.
about Phil Foden. He's looking at the headlines this morning, Paul. It looks like this poor kid has got all of the weight of the world on his shoulders, and that success for England will depend on him. Is that an exaggeration?
Probably is a little bit. I'd take whatever you read in the papers with maybe a fistful of salt, to be honest. Look, he's a very, very good player. He's an exceptional player. England haven't had a player like him for a long time. He's got the kind of skill that you'd see from a Brazilian or an Argentinian or a Spaniard. He's exceptional, and that's why a lot of people are quite puzzled that he's hardly featured in either of England games so far. He came on late on in the game against Iran. He didn't feature at all against the USA, which was weird considering how awful England were. A lot of people saying, why didn't Gareth Southgate bring him on? Other people turning it into a positive and saying, look, England are still in this competition and they haven't needed to use Phil Foden. So a lot of people are saying Phil Foden needs to feature in this match against Wales. Gareth Southgate has said already that he does feature in their World Cup plans. I'd be surprised if you don't see him at some point, possibly even in the starting 11, but we know that Gareth Southgate is a conservative manager. He's not prone to making changes. He would have wanted to have made changes for this game. He would have hoped England would have won their first two games, meaning this game would be redundant and he could rotate the squad a little bit, but he can't. It's not in his nature, and so we expect England to feel pretty much the same starting lineup that they did against the USA.
OK, well, on that, let's hear what England manager Southgate did have to say on this.
It's like any two countries whose borders are next to each other. There's a competitive rivalry. For me, it's a great sporting rivalry. We've got to focus on performance. We've got to play well. You know, we've got to bring our quality to the table and give that the best opportunity we have of making the difference on the pitch.
And of course, we are GB News, so it wouldn't be fair without hearing what the Welsh manager had to say. This is what Rob Page said about his team's performance tonight.
This tournament has shown that every team is beatable. I really do. So, of course, England are beatable. They've got a wonderful pool of players to choose from, I might add. So, whatever team he puts on that pitch is going to be a tough challenge for us. And, of course, they're going to be favourites to win the games.
And Paul, how do the fans feel out there this morning? Obviously, if Wales get knocked out, the Welsh fans, I guess, will be coming home. Is that how it works in football? And also for the English fans, just remind me, because I am a football idiot, if England lose tonight, I nearly said we, but well, I am English. If England lose tonight, have they got another match to play?
No, so you play 3 games in the group stage. England and Wales have played 2 already. This is the last one against each other. England can afford to lose and still qualify for the next round. They can afford to lose 3-0 and still qualify. Wales, it's much harder, right? If they want to keep things in their own hands and forget about the USA-Iran game, they need to win 4-0. But if they win 1-0 and Iran and the USA draw, then Wales and England are through to the next round. So it's going to be harder for Wales than it is for England, and what the Welsh need, they're probably not going to win 4-0. They're probably going to win 1-2-0, something like that. So they are going to need the other game to go in their favour. But look, this has been a World Cup of upsets. We've seen Saudi Arabia, Japan. We saw Ghana yesterday upsetting the odds, the lowest ranked team in the competition, turning over South Korea. So this is very much a World Cup for underdogs, and indeed that's what Rob Page has been saying. He's been trying to take some of the pressure off the Welsh, and that is why Wales will be up for it this evening. And make no bones about it, it's going to be fascinating to watch because both teams need to come back from those appalling results, and Wales really need to win. It's going to be great to watch.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you for making it easy as well. I'll sound like I know what I'm talking about when I'm watching it with the kids tonight. Thank you so much, Paul Hawkins there out in Qatar with the World Cup. Now, after the break, I'm going to welcome my panel to the show this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by the author and academic Joanna Williams, former Special Advisor at the Home Office Claire Pearsall, and the Conservative MP for the Isle of Wight, lucky man, Bob Seeley. See you in a minute. Oh, actually, we're going to tell you about the Twitter poll. We've got a Twitter poll running, and want to know whether you support nuclear energy. An overwhelming 95% of you do so far. We're going to be having an announcement this morning. We're going to be dissecting what that will mean for Great Britain's power independence, of fuel and energy independence. Cast your vote now, won't you? Send me an email as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think about any of that. And you can contribute if you've got thoughts on the football tonight. You're looking forward to it, let me know. Time for a quick break.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Certainly been a gloomy start to the day for many, with extensive low cloud, mist and fog. Visibility slowly improves today, but for many it is a dull day. But it's a dry day. A weather front out in the west being held back by a ridge of high pressure. But it's that ridge of high pressure with its light winds that has led to that extensive low cloud, mist and fog development overnight. And some stubborn fog patches will remain into the afternoon for the central lowlands, Vale of York, Welsh Marches, for example, and across much of England into East Wales, southern Scotland, extensive low cloud and mistiness. But around the fringes of the UK, west and north in particular, some sunshine coming through, and 10 or 11 Celsius at best, particularly towards the southwest, mid to high single figures where we've got the mist, low cloud and fog. Some showers will be close to the far southeast through the day and overnight, but for the vast majority it's staying dry for the time being. And again, overnight we'll see that low cloud, mist and fog developing. So once again, a misty start to the day, some poor visibility on the roads first thing. I think northern Scotland, West Wales, southwest England, most likely to see a bright start, but with a touch of frost here. And for Northern Ireland, here the cloud will thicken through the morning with some outbreaks of rain edging in from the west. Not a great deal of rain, but rain nevertheless. A keen breeze coming up from the south here. 10 or 11 Celsius, 12 Celsius in the far southwest, but for many where we keep the extensive low cloud through the afternoon, temperatures at mid to high single figures. Into Wednesday evening, again we've got that extensive low cloud. I think it will lower further through the night on Wednesday night, and that means Thursday will start off with widespread fog, some difficult driving conditions with very poor visibility about. But brighter skies arrive on Friday and Saturday, albeit with lower temperatures.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Very good morning. It is 10:20. You are watching and listening to Bev Turner today on GB News. I'm so happy to be sat here with my coffee and my panel now. I'm joined this morning by former Home Office Special Advisor Claire Pearsall, author and academic Joanna Williams, and Conservative MP Bob Seeley. So you've all got some stories that have caught your eye. Bob, before we go on to this, can I just talk about the fact that you're the MP for the Isle of Wight, and that's got to be the greatest job in the world?
It is.
I love my patch. I wouldn't want to represent anywhere else. It's like being married to the right woman. I'm so lucky. I'm truly blessed to have the most wonderful constituency. And next time you're in Yarmouth, you tell me.
I will.
And I just want to make sure you know there is for everyone, for all my mates and all occasional MP that comes to the island. I do have Bob's Guide to the Island.
Oh.
I don't think you've yet received a copy, but you will do.
I will definitely do that. In fact, we should maybe come and we'll do an outside broadcast for GB News.
Yes.
Right, let's move on to our story. Joanna, this is Keir Starmer's plan to tax private schools.
Absolutely. So he wants to put VAT onto private school fees, which will essentially raise the cost to parents by about 20%. And Keir Starmer argues bring substantial amounts of money into the Treasury. I mean, I have to say this story makes me a bit cross because I think there are so many problems with what's going on in the world of education right now. Post-lockdowns, we've got thousands of children absent from school roles, just missing.
There's 100,000 that disappeared.
Ghost children. That they've been termed, and nobody knows where they are. We've got educational standards plummeting for some very young children as well in their final years of primary school. The SATs tests that they do at that age, the results are coming down. We've had grade inflation masking the problems at the upper end of secondary school. And yet Keir Starmer wants to tinker around with the fees that a tiny proportion of parents pay for their children to go to private school. It just seems like a massive distraction from someone who's got nothing to say about the real problems that are facing our schools at the moment. And you know, I think it plays well, perhaps, to Labour's most militant constituency. He can stand there and be the big tough guy, having a pop at private schools because they're posh and rich people. But I think it's a cheap shot that will do nothing to improve the educational standards that the overwhelming majority of children in this country receive.
I mean, presumably as well, Claire, it will... If there are lots of families who actually stretch themselves for private education and they use that as a way to invest their money, effectively they're investing it in their children's future. It does seem ridiculous that we have a two-tier education system in the 21st century. There is a part of me that is deeply uncomfortable about that. But if you prevent more of these families taking the private school option, you're going to push them into the state school option, which is already overcrowded and underfunded. Is that what's going to happen?
Well, it is, because if those schools disappear, if the bursaries that a lot of people rely on to be able to afford that kind of education, if they disappear, then those school children are going to end up into the state system, which is already overcrowded, it's already underfunded and crumbling as we speak. But I think the most worrying thing is those parents who save and scrimp in order to give their children that education, sometimes they've already been let down by the state system. You have a lot of kids with special educational needs of varying different degrees who have been let down for one reason or another, and they find solace and they find their place within that private system, and it's completely up to the parents how they spend their money. I'm all in favour of people spending their money how they wish, and I find it incredibly hypocritical of the Labour government, whose ministers mainly send their own children to private schools, will then stop that being a reality for other people. And I just think it's incredibly wrong to say that you can't do something.
Bob, is this just Keir Starmer playing a bit of politics, probably feeling quite confident at the moment, thinking, I can say anything, I'm going to win the next election. Let's just make a statement about taxing the rich, because that's what this is.
It's a cheap shot and an easy target, so I completely agree. We need to be raising standards, not lowering them. And for sure, you know, we need to be driving up standards in state schools. And I was so worried about the missing kids, because that happens in the Isle of Wight as well. You've had families that have effectively just dropped out of the education system. The life chances of those children are just going to be dramatically affected, and actually goes to show that there were huge harms that we did during COVID. But yeah, this is just Keir Starmer being cheap and trying to get the left on side.
You said, Bob, there were huge harms that we did during COVID, but the problem was we knew, right? We absolutely knew. I wrote that schools shouldn't close down before they closed down. We knew that COVID posed very little risk to children. We knew that keeping children at home would push the most disadvantaged children into terrible circumstances. And the problem is we've increased inequality. We've increased educational inequality.
Absolutely.
There was no reason for any of that to have occurred.
The problem is, at the time, people didn't... We don't know what we know now.
But that's just not true, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, that's just not true.
That first spring lockdown, we should have done this topic. We've got to move on about China, but as usual, we just mentioned the COVID word and everybody goes through. I suppose we might argue that the first lockdown was valid and then subsequent lockdowns when the children were clearly paying a price.
Okay.
But I want to move on, Bob, to your story. This is Rishi Sunak, who has stated that the golden era of UK-China relations is over. I didn't realise we ever had a true golden era anyway, did we?
I think we were trying to sell the idea of a golden era where somehow you let China into the World Trade Organization and suddenly everyone lives in peace and happiness ever after. What we've seen, actually, Bev, is a crisis in authoritarian states. So Iran in crisis, Russia in crisis, China in crisis. But all, in their different ways, are using artificial intelligence and big data to try to destroy and crush dissent that may otherwise overthrow these regimes. With China, we've got some really big questions, and the thing that concerns me most of all, and it affects everyone because we buy their goods and we're going to be threatened by their war with Taiwan in the next 10 years, is that if we allow ourselves to become economically dependent on China in the same way that we became energy dependent, or Europe became energy dependent on Russia, we are just letting ourselves into a world of pain and future. So what I want the government to be understanding the dependency threat and trying to diversify our supplies. So we don't get everything from China. We get stuff from Bangladesh and Vietnam and increasingly Africa as well, so that China has less power. Because China wants us to be dependent on it whilst it wants to become self-sufficient. So when it does invade Taiwan, it can say, you won't dare put on sanctions because you will not survive the economic war that results, where we will.
We have all got so used to buying cheap products in the shops thanks to China. We need them more than they need us, don't we?
Not just China, but you're right. I mean, the trade imbalance with China is vast, and all that money is going one way. And OK, we sell Land Rovers and, you know, a few other bits and pieces, but there is a huge trade imbalance. And one of the problems is that China is still described as being a developing nation, despite the fact that it has the second largest...
Well, this is what I was about to say, Joe, because we give them £51.7 million in foreign aid.
No.
Sorry, what?
That's absolutely farcical. I think one of the problems is, though, it's not just consumers who are attracted to buying cheap goods. It's the whole of the British economy, it seems to me. I mean, we look to China to help us with nuclear power stations, with 5G technology.
Not anymore. We stopped that. I led that Huawei rebellion, and the Huawei are now out of this country because me, Ian Duncan Smith, Damien Green, and one or two others, we got that rebellion.
But it was still there in the beginning. It was still up there.
Exactly.
And it's not something that we haven't known what the Chinese government is like. This is not something new that's suddenly come across as a surprise, that the authoritarian state and the surveillance that they put in. So I think that we are really behind the curve and should have done this a lot sooner.
We are, but it is sometimes easy to... I mean, look, I've only been in Parliament since 2017, so the political classes, sometimes you're right, they take too long to shift. And they weren't quick enough to see what was happening. And there was a sense of... It's almost like you're in a relationship and you don't necessarily want to see the relationship going in a bad direction. And that's what we've done with China.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong than dragging a marriage out for longer and destroy each other in the end, right? Is that what's going to happen? Because also, what about... I want Rishi Sunak to be coming out and making much firmer statements. I'm not sure if he said anything in the last 24 hours about what the Chinese government are currently doing to their people with the protests on the COVID lockdowns, Claire. I feel like the West are incredibly flaccid when it comes to making what needs to be a more muscular statement about the state that China is in.
Yes, I agree, but I also think that most people aren't aware of what is going on. We're only just seeing footage coming out, courtesy of people putting them on their social media accounts, which now the Chinese government are asking them to delete. So I don't think that the general public actually realise quite how bad it is and quite how severe the lockdown treatment is being to those individuals. And it's only now that we're seeing an uprising. As we've seen in other countries with the Iranian protests, for example, it's only now that people are going, that's what it is. So I think we need that coverage more.
But Sunak would have to be a bit careful, though, because, I mean, let's not forget, protest was actually banned in this country during lockdown, and when protests...
Oh, sorry, Joe, you cannot compare. You cannot compare the fact that 1 in 12 people in Xinjiang province are in re-education centres with one of the freest societies in the world.
I'm sorry, but we stopped people sitting on park benches. this is true. I mean, I'm not making this. I wish I was sitting here making this up.
It was COVID. We do not.
Well, that's exactly what they're saying in China.
You can say we overreacted, but to say we are an authoritarian state because a couple of coppers overreacted in Derbyshire, and the whole thing was,
But I'm sorry, this wasn't a couple of coppers overreacting in Derbyshire. This was people in London.
Joe,
were
if you're
stopped
saying
from
there's no
sitting
difference
on park
between the
benches.
UK and China, good luck to you. I don't agree.
I think we came as close as we could ever have imagined to feeling like we were being run by an authoritarian government in a way. The comparison goes only so far. I agree. We aren't actually being welded into our houses, which then have house fires, and whole families died in China this week. We've seen the quarantine camps being built in China. I'm hoping that your boss doesn't have any plans for those here, but but for those of us who were hyper-vigilant to the fact that our civil liberties were compromised in a way that we just never imagined in our lifetime.
As one of those MPs who became increasingly concerned about lockdown and the appalling consequences that became clear, certainly after the second lockdown, I was one of those people who said to Boris, you cannot go into further lockdowns. I can't even remember how many we had. It was so painful and awful. I'm also one of those people who has been championing the fact that this virus probably came out of that Wuhan Institute.
Absolutely.
And we now know that Farah and other top Western scientists, whilst immediately thinking, where has this come from? It may well have come from a laboratory, then effectively hid that information and said it's not from a laboratory, it's natural. We've never found a natural origin for it. And all the evidence, some circumstantial, some not, suggests that actually the procedures in Wuhan were incredibly sloppy. So this virus, I mean, it shows the power of China, that effectively they've been able to silence this conversation, even amongst Western scientists.
Absolutely. Right. You're in the right place, Bob. We're going to get on well, I can tell.
We look forward to it.
No, thank you, panel. OK, after the break, the Energy Secretary, Grant Shapps, has launched a major package of investment to secure UK's energy independence today. It includes a commitment to nuclear power. We're going to be discussing just how safe that is after the news.
It is 10:33. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. A section of the new online safety bill has been removed following criticism by some Conservatives that it posed a risk to free speech. The amendment means big tech, like social media sites, will no longer be required to remove harmful material if it's deemed to be legal. Labour claim the change is a major weakening of the legislation. The online safety bill is due to return to Parliament next week after repeatedly being delayed. The Culture Minister, Michelle Donnellan, told GB News the most important part of the bill is strengthening accountability and transparency. The government's given the go-ahead to build the Sizewell C nuclear power plant and committed £700 million to the scheme. The plant, which is being developed by French energy giant EDF, will be built in Suffolk. Ministers say the move will create 10,000 highly skilled jobs and provide reliable, low-carbon power to the equivalent of 6 million homes for more than 50 years. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, says the announcement means greater energy independence for the UK.
It's a combination between taxpayers' money but also private investment, and that's, as you rightly say, is the next stage. But it's a sign of, if you like, the confidence that the British government has in nuclear as part of our energy mix. And a very, very important point, which has been driven home so clearly by Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine and all that's done to energy prices, that we must have a mix of energy in this country.
The number of people in England and Wales describing themselves as Christian has fallen below half for the first time. The latest data from the Office for National Statistics also showed the number of people who identify their ethnic group as white has fallen by just over 4% in the last decade to 81.7%. The Prime Minister says the UK's golden era of relations with China is over. In his first major foreign policy speech, Rishi Sunak vowed to evolve the UK's stance towards the country during the Lord Mayor's banquet speech in London last night. He added the UK now needed to replace wishful thinking with robust pragmatism towards competitors. And it's all to play for tonight in Qatar as England and Wales go head-to-head in the final match of Group B. To get through to the knockouts, Wales must beat England and hope the USA draw with Iran. Well, meanwhile, Gareth Southgate's side are looking to bounce back from their draw with the US and qualify top of the group. TV, online, DAB+ radio, you're up to date on GB News. Here's Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2014 and €1.1577. The price of gold is £1,460 and 58 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,532 points.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Very good morning, it's 10:37. This is Bev Turner Today on GB News. Now, in the last hour, the Business and Energy Secretary, Grant Shapps, has revealed a major package of investment to secure the UK's energy independence, including a commitment to nuclear energy. Let's have a listen.
So I'm excited to sign off the 700 million. This means that we will be building Sizewell C. It's going to power 6 million homes. It's going to provide 10,000 jobs, perhaps immediately on site, 20,000 overall, and a lot of apprenticeships as well. So good news for Britain's energy independence. The money will be raised to build it. It's a combination between taxpayers' money, but also private investment, and that's, as you rightly say, is the next stage. But it's a sign of, if you like, the confidence that the British government has in nuclear as part of our energy mix. And a very, very important point, which has been driven home so clearly by Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, all that's done to energy prices, that we must have a mix of energy in this country: renewable, wind power, offshore, solar and nuclear.
Quite hard to overstate the importance of this, Tom Harwood, isn't it? What does this mean? What does this statement mean for our energy security here?
Well, it's significant. Nuclear power stations are very, very powerful. It's hard to overestimate the proportion of electricity that they can power. Grant Shapps there talking about 6 million homes. One nuclear power station is 7% of the United Kingdom's electricity requirements. So just one. It's a different league to sort of wind farms, solar farms, or even North Sea oil and gas. But clearly there's been a bit of an issue here in terms of the last 3 decades when we haven't built any new nuclear power stations. Government after government has prevaricated. Margaret Thatcher built 3, and after her there seemed to be a bit of a wobble in terms of British confidence in nuclear energy. There was, towards the end of Tony Blair's time in office, a lean towards it, and then it was rowed back upon again again, the Liberal Democrats have been very squeamish about it, but now it seems that there is a bit of a consensus building from both the Conservative and the Labour Party that for the baseload energy that isn't intermittent, that is always on, and that is low carbon to no carbon, nuclear power does provide that energy. But this is just one power station, and ultimately we're far behind countries like France when it comes to the number of nuclear power stations that we have, and ultimately it will take 10 years to come on stream.
You're too young to remember this, Tom Harwood, but of course the Chernobyl disaster was the worst PR exercise for nuclear power. And from that point on, I think especially Western leaders got incredibly nervous about power stations. Has there been, Tom, I know this is only just broken, so it might be a bit of a mean question, but has there been much reaction from people in the Sizewell area to this announcement?
Well, there have been protests going on for quite some time from some local residents. It's important to note that this is a long discussion. Sizewell has been talked about for a long time, but Sizewell C, the C is important because there was a Sizewell A and a Sizewell B. This is on an existing nuclear site. One of the problems that we have in the United Kingdom is actually a lot of these nuclear power stations that came on stream in the 60s, 70s and 80s, they're now winding down to the end of their life. So actually, when we're talking about new nuclear power stations coming on stream to power all these homes, in many cases, they're just replacing what we're losing in the next few years. So potentially arguments like Sizewell and Hinckley as well, these are places where already nuclear power stations have been hosted. Perhaps we should be talking more about replacing capacity that we're losing rather than adding in new capacity, as sometimes the government likes to imply.
Yeah, OK, brilliant. Thank you, Tom, for that clarification. And also, I want to understand a little bit more about this. I don't know about you, but I still feel a little bit conflicted. I'm not sure what the pros and cons are. Well, Tom Whipple is the science editor at the Sunday Times, and he's joining us now. Hi, Tom. Great to see you this morning. Now, am I right in saying that nuclear power was accepted globally, it was doing very well, and then the Chernobyl disaster happened, and that made people very nervous? Should we be confident that any fears that we might have had then are allayed because the technology has developed, for instance?
I think to an extent, I think your analysis isn't wrong. People did get very worried by Chernobyl. It was a series of quite unusual events. It's still worth saying that in terms of per megawatt of power produced over history, nuclear is probably the safest power source that we've ever created. But these single sort of high-profile events do, give it a bad name, to say the least. The kind of accident at Chernobyl simply couldn't happen in a modern nuclear power station. It involves some very shoddy design, and it certainly couldn't happen in some of the small modular nuclear reactors that we're looking at the moment. That was what happened, but we're in a very different world now. And I think people are probably also looking, as Grant Shapps said, at what happened now and wishing that we had made the decision to build nuclear reactors 10 years ago. And now, the second best time to build them is now.
There's also this concern always, Tom, about nuclear waste from these power stations. What do we do with it? In a simple way, what do we do with it now in 2022? Is it still a problem?
Yeah, it is. Some of the nuclear waste problems have changed. We've got better ways of storing it. There's an idea of, there's now that it's turned into something called synrock, which is synthetic stone, which is a lot easier to handle than liquid waste. We produce less of it now, in part because the early nuclear reactors were there as a means of developing nuclear weapons as well. They weren't particularly prioritised towards the generation of power. But there is an issue of disposing it. It's an issue we need to deal with. So far, Finland is the only country that's really got a properly long-term solution to it. It's found bedrock that's very, very stable and it's burying in it. We're trying to do the same, but it requires getting communities on board, and so far we have failed to do that.
So Grant Shapps was saying basically that global gas prices being at record highs caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we need this to bring British energy for British homes. Do you know, Tom, how much it will cost to replace this infrastructure, which has effectively become a little tired? As Tom Harwood was just explaining, it's not necessarily that people have to be worried that a nuclear power station is going to be suddenly built in their backyard. We're talking about existing sites. But do you have any idea of the time frame and when we might see a difference in our electricity and energy bills? I'm guessing quite a long time.
Yeah, the time frame for these is currently, it takes a decade or more to get these things going. There is a hope to move to these small modular nuclear reactors, which are effectively a production line of them that you can plug and play a lot quicker. The economics of nuclear are interesting because it costs a lot to install. You basically don't have to refuel them. You've got ones that will have a decade's worth of fuel in them when they start. You're comparing sort of running costs with capital costs, with structural costs. You're also comparing with cost per megawatt. And that's very difficult because on the face of it, renewables are the cheapest form of energy we've ever had. I mean, the revolution in renewables has been astonishing, and they are so much cheaper than nuclear. Of course, the issue is you're not quite comparing like for like. At the moment, there is not a lot of wind blowing in the UK, and if we were relying solely on renewables, we would have to have a heck of a lot of batteries, more batteries probably than exist currently in the world. So, the renewables cannot at the moment be the only way of doing things. We may have found very clever solutions in 10, 15 years, but I think the thing we've learned is you need to diversify and take a lot of bets to see what works. And at the moment, nuclear does seem a sensible bet because it doesn't rely on supplies from abroad. It does cost on the face of it a lot more per megawatt, but it keeps going and you can rely on it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tom. Tom Whipple there from The Times. Right, now, Britain's oil exploration companies are warning that the government's new energy profits levy, which taxes them at 75%, poses an existential threat to the UK's oil and gas industry. The Association of British Independent Oil Exploration Companies, or Brindex, has written to Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, warning of investment becoming unviable, leading to the rapid onset, the decline of the North Sea, leading to higher bills for customers and weakening of the UK's energy security. With this exclusive is GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan, who joins me in the studio now with On the Money. Explain this story to me a little bit more, Liam. I don't really understand what this is.
So what's happening, Bev, is today in the House of Commons is the second reading, the introduction of the Energy Profits Levy legislation, which was part of Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement. Over recent months, since the war in Ukraine and higher energy prices weakened UK energy security, the tax on companies exploring and extracting oil and gas from the North Sea has gone up. It was already at 40% on their profits, a lot more than the 19% corporation tax, which everyone else pays. Yeah. They paid a supplement, it went to 40%. Then in May, Rishi Sunak increased that to 65%, and now Jeremy Hunt's increased that to 75%. And I've got a graphic here of a letter that Brindex have sent to Jeremy Hunt. Now, Brindex, they are the small energy explorers. They account for about 60% of the UK's oil and gas extraction. These are British companies. It says the latest rise to 75% poses an existential threat, get my dentures into the industry, and with it, jobs and our nation's energy security. UK upstream companies, that's the oil explorers and producers, can no longer shoulder this extreme open-ended tax burden. And then Brindex go on to say that if we continue down this path of the current anticipated 75% tax rate, that makes further investment unviable, and so begins a rapid onset of the decline of the North Sea. Now, this isn't Shell and BP, right? But these big oil energy giants, the North Sea's nothing to them. This little extra profits levy, it's a rounding error in their global operations. Brindex are the small oil and gas explorers, the British companies, the operators who account for about 60 to 70% of our oil and gas extraction in the North Sea. Right. They mine the fields that the big companies find unviable. And I spoke to Jack Tom. He helps to run something called Tailwind Energy, one of these small operators, and he's also speaking here on behalf of Brindex.
Okay.
Really here today to talk about what is an HMT-inflicted complete collapse of the North Sea. There will be capital flight, and the timing of this is very poor given how strategic the North Sea is right now in the face of war with Russia and runaway inflations. This finance bill will increase energy costs to consumers. It will actually lower revenues over time for the HMT because they are on the hook for 20 billion pounds of decommissioning, and that will accelerate as fields get decommissioned earlier.
Jacques there mentioned HMT. That's industry largo for Her Majesty's Treasury. What these small oil operators are saying, this will lead to a lot less revenue for the Exchequer because a lot of them will have to fold. These are tiny companies that many of them only operate in the North Sea. But Brindex, they're keen to stress to me, they don't necessarily mind the 75% tax in and of itself, but they're saying if it does come in, it should apply only when the oil price is above a certain level, rather than applying wherever the oil price is. And that's a major qualification. So they're not saying no completely to the 75% headline. They're saying it needs to be finessed. Here's Jacques Thome again.
Capital will leave the country. And with that, a lot of jobs, infrastructure, and most importantly, energy security and bills will suffer. So what we're saying is create a very simple amendment with a price floor that will protect capital, protect jobs and energy security. And then above that level, we're happy to pay 75%. And the revenue will actually make more money over time because we will continue to reinvest and keep oil production up, which is what they need for their treasury budget.
Exclusive of yours, Liam, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something that I've followed for some time. Brindex are a very important entity within the UK economy. They're a big employer, particularly in Scotland. But these are high-paid, skilled jobs that many working people aspire after, use them to work on oil rigs, raise money for themselves and their families to put down the deposit on a house. And again, while the press focus on what Shell says, what BP says, and all the rest of it, this is what's really happening. These are small and medium-sized enterprises, often set up and financed by British people who employ lots of our skilled workers. And they're saying, and I do have some sympathy, I have to say, that a 75% tax rate on energy profits, starting from zero, if you like, wherever the oil price is, wherever those profits are, that's going to kill off a lot of these companies, weaken our energy security, and lead to higher bills. Now, the Treasury, of course, they say that a 75% tax on oil profits isn't particularly unusual by international standards, and they say they're going to press ahead with this legislation, which I say is being tabled in the House of Commons today.
Well, it'd be really interesting to see how this pans out, Liam. Thank you so much. As always, you'll be keeping a close eye on it, I know. Right, now, moving on. Over 100 companies have permanently moved to 4-day weeks in a bid to improve employees' work-life blend. They say that 3-day weekends are the future. But just 1 in 3 jobs offer flexible working options. It seems that many employers don't agree. Peter Dowd is the Labour MP for Bootle and former Shadow Chief Secretary. Good morning, Peter. Thank you very much for talking to me about this. It feels like such a significant social change. It's almost unprecedented in modern times to have such a change to our working week. What's your reaction to it? Good or bad news?
Well, it's very good news, and we really do need the time for change. It's 100 years this year since the 5-day week was introduced. So here we are, 100 years on, and still in the same position we were 100 years ago. So it really is time for change. And these events are often put down as going to be too expensive. They're going to cost too much money. It will affect employment, and they really never do. So it is time for change.
So, Peter, why is it important? What do we get if we have a 4-day working week and a 3-day weekend? What are the benefits for people?
Well, the point you made about work-life balance, there's that aspect to it. Actually, productivity is much better in this sort of environment. That's been proven from some of the studies that have gone on. The issue about retention of staff is much better when you have these working conditions. And of course, people actually want to go and work for companies who have this offer on. In fact, it's often shown that there's big multiple increase in the amount of people who actually apply for a job in a company that has a 4-day week. And it's overall good for the economy, as I said, in terms of productivity. Productivity goes up as well, and that was found by Microsoft in Japan. It's been found by work done in Reykjavik in Iceland. So there are so many benefits to it as well. And it also has to be set in the context, remember. that women would retire at 60, men would retire at 65. Now women are having to retire at 67, 68, men at 68. So people have a longer working life. So why not have a shorter working week?
But Peter, aren't we just getting a bit lazy? I can't help but think that extra day during the week when people are not at work, if you've got small children, I get it. If you've got kids, I understand that we can feel completely strung out if we're working full time. But if you're a 21-year-old just going into the workplace, you're going to spend that day sat at home watching Netflix, aren't you? You're not going to be doing anything productive.
Well, the productivity comes from the work. That's the point I was trying to make before. So if you're there for 4 days a week and your productivity goes up by a third over a 5-day week, it seems to me that there's no argument that economically, overall, that's far more productive and it's better for somebody's work-life balance. If that 21-year-old wants to go out, walks, wants to sit watching Netflix, wants to sit watching the telly, really, whatever they want to do is a matter for them. They're employed for 4 days, say 32 hours for the sake of argument. And as long as they're productive in work, why can't they spend the rest of the time doing whatever they want? It's not for me to tell people how they should spend the leisure time.
But Peter, doesn't it beg the question, why are they not being more productive over those 5 days? If they can do as much in 4 days as they were doing in 5 days, then make them work harder over 5 days.
Well, it's an interesting point because I referred to the issue about productivity earlier on. We tend to be about 30% less productive than the Germans. We tend to be less productive than those employers who have a 4-day week. And that's because of investments, say, in the workplace. But investment in the workplace to make it get greater productivity isn't mutually exclusive from you having less hours. In fact, it's a sort of they're not mutually exclusive, and actually it's a serendipity, isn't it? Less working hours, more productivity. What's not to like?
I just can't understand. I think if the research showed that people at work were not doing as much, were doing so little over 5 days that they could fit it into 4 days, then there's a problem with management, surely. It's saying, what are you doing? Are you spending too much time on Facebook, sat at your desk? Do more work. We're in an economic crisis. No one's got any money, Peter.
I think the issue is that they're the same arguments that were used when Ford Motor Company introduced the 5-day week. Is that they introduced the 5-day week, and people said, "Oh, well, why can't we have the 6-day week? 5-day week, you're going to lose money. The productivity is going to go down, etc., etc. Your workers will be lazier." And exactly the opposite happened. So a company can get better productivity in a shorter time. Why not? And investment is an important element to this with companies as well. So I genuinely believe there are benefits for everybody, for companies, and in a sense the studies show that. And history shows that. This was said about the working week, rather the unpaid working week. Oh, if you pay people, they'll just be lazy. They're just not coming to work as much as they should. The equal pay for women. That was exactly the same. People said it wouldn't work. And of course it does work. The minimum wage, we were going to have mass unemployment. It didn't work. So all those arguments used against these sort of progressive employment practices have been used since time immemorial, and they're proved to be wrong every time.
OK, well, I hope that I'm proved wrong. Peter Dowd there, Labour MP. Thank you so much for joining us. What do you think? gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's the end of the first hour. If you sat at home, not at work, thank you. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm going to be right back after a short break.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, still to come before midday, we've got a lot to get through. Former England player Danny Mills and former Welsh international Neville Southall will give their thoughts on tonight's World Cup clash between England and Wales. And the budget in Scotland takes place on December the 15th. The government there is being warned to fund higher education or face dire consequences. Plus, my panel with three great stories: online safety bill amendments, childcare costs, and Just Stop Oil lunatics causing chaos. That's all coming up after a look at the latest news.
A very good morning to you. It is 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The number of people in England and Wales describing themselves as Christian has fallen below half for the first time. The latest data from the Office for National Statistics shows 46.2% of us identified as Christian when the census was carried out last year. That compares to 59.3% a decade ago. While the number of people who say they have no religion has increased by 12% in the same time. It also showed the number of people who identify their ethnic group as white had fallen by just over 4% in the last decade to 81.7%. The government has given the go-ahead to build Sizewell C nuclear power plant and committed £700 million for the scheme. The plant's being developed by the French energy giant EDF and it will be built in Suffolk. Ministers say the move will create 10,000 highly skilled jobs and provide reliable low-carbon power to the equivalent of 6 million homes for more than 50 years. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, says the announcement means greater energy independence for the UK.
It's a combination between taxpayers' money but also private investment, and that's, as you rightly say, is the next stage. But it's a sign of, if you like, the confidence that the British government has in nuclear as part of our energy mix. And a very, very important point, which has been driven home so clearly by Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine and all that's done to energy prices, that we must have a mix of energy in this country.
A new section of the new online safety bill has been removed following criticism by some Conservatives that it posed a risk to free speech. The amendment means big tech, like social media sites, will no longer be required to remove harmful material if it's deemed to be legal. The online safety bill is due to return to Parliament next week after being repeatedly delayed. The Culture Minister, Michelle Donnellan, told GB News the most important part of the bill is strengthening accountability and transparency.
In terms of illegal content or also harmful content towards children, that will no longer be allowed on social media platforms. If they evade the law, then they could face fines up to 10% of their global turnover, and that is billions of pounds. That will certainly hit them where it hurts and be a strong deterrent to prevent them from acting in the way that they've done up to now, which has been putting profits before people and before children.
The Shadow Work and Pension Secretary says Labour's concerned the change is a major watering down of the legislation.
So there is concern about the fact that they appear to be weakening that bill, but we certainly do need a form of online safety bill to protect people. We've seen people be driven into the most tragic of circumstances because of content that they've been able to find online. And I'm a parent, I've got 2 girls, an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. I mean, it actually terrifies me to think that they might be able to find horrible material, particularly at stages in their life when they are vulnerable, because we all know adolescence is a vulnerable time.
China's ambassador to the UK has been summoned to the Foreign Office over a diplomatic row following the arrest and alleged beating of a British journalist covering COVID protests. It's after Chinese authorities clamped down on demonstrations against COVID restrictions in the country after unrest over the weekend. A heavy police presence has been reported in several cities to deter further protests. The country says it will speed up its vaccination process for those aged 60 and over. The Prime Minister says the UK's golden era of relations with China is over. In his first major foreign policy speech, Rishi Sunak vowed to evolve the UK's stance towards the country during the Lord Mayor's banquet last night. He added the UK now needed to replace wishful thinking with robust pragmatism towards competitors. A review into clinical records of 44 patients who died under the care of a former neurologist has found a failure of care, and potentially thousands more people could be affected. The review follows a recall of 2,500 outpatients who were treated by Dr Michael Watt at the Belfast Health Trust in 2018. The Royal College of Physicians found that treatment given was unnecessary and invasive. Hundreds of thousands of more homes could be at high risk of flooding in the coming decades, according to the National Infrastructure Commission. Its report says the dual impact of climate change and urbanisation is causing the problem. It's calling for £12 billion of investment to protect the 600,000 homes that could be at risk in England. The organisation's calling for £12 billion of investment in drainage systems and stricter controls on property developments. And it is all to play for tonight in Qatar as England and Wales go head-to-head in the final match of Group B. To get through to the knockouts, Wales must beat England and hope the USA draw with Iran. Meanwhile, Gareth Southgate's side are looking to bounce back from their draw with the US and qualify as top of their group. Well, the former football player and manager, Harry Redknapp, says Wales are the underdog.
They'll come out and give everything tonight, and we've all seen games where the underdog can turn it round. If they work hard enough and they get the breaks, nothing's impossible. But I'd be very surprised if England couldn't win tonight.
You're up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Bev.
Very good morning, it's 11:07. Welcome to Bev Turner today on TV, radio and online on GB News. We've got what's being called the Battle of Britain tonight as England take on Wales in their final group game. I'm going to be joined by the former Welsh and England footballers going head-to-head. Who's going to win tonight? Let me know what you think. Higher and further education in Scotland is facing significant financial challenges. So has the Scottish Government's strategy stalled? And will they be able to return to economic growth within the education sector? I'm going to be joined by the Director at Universities Scotland. And my fantastic commentators are going to be back in about 20 minutes for analysis of the day's biggest stories, including news that we could all have our jobs replaced by artificial intelligence one day. Does this scare you as much as it does me? And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. Today on Twitter, we've got a poll asking, do you support nuclear energy? This is off the back of Grant Shapps' announcement that we're having a £700 million investment into nuclear. 95% of you so far say that you do support nuclear energy. You'll be very pleased to hear that. At GB News, of course, for your opinion on anything else. Now, a lot of you might be hot-footing it home from work early or pulling out of things you've got to do tonight because you want to sit in front of the TV. England and Wales are getting ready to take each other on in the World Cup Group B qualifier at 7 o'clock. Let's cross now to the Kirby estate in south-east London. They've got hundreds of England flags draped throughout the houses down there. Our London reporter Alice Porter is there. How's it looking, Alice? I imagine it's pretty quiet at this time of the day.
Good morning. Yes, it is quiet for the moment, but I think it's going to heat up a little bit later today because we've got over 400 flags which are all decked around the Kirby estate, which has become somewhat iconic in South East London. And the man who knows all about it is Chris Dowse, who joins me now.
Hello.
Hello there. Chris, I want to first talk to you about this wonderful mural that we've got here, because I know this was put up in the summer to support the Lionesses. Just tell us about how that came about, because I know we've chatted about the flags, but the mural it looks amazing.
It's a work of art. I mean, Mark from Wolves, I contacted him last year after the men's Euros, and I said to him, if you ever find yourself in Bermondsey, please can you come to the Kirby estate and do one for us? Didn't think of like how much it would cost or anything, we just wanted him to come to the estate. And when he come to the estate, he drove on, he said, that's the wall. And then he asked us, like, who do you want? I said, well, it can only be one person. And even he didn't get it, but everyone we said we were going to do it never guessed the right person. But obviously we asked for Fran Kirby, being on the Kirby estate, and then one night he turned up with his army, and within a few hours that masterpiece was created. Oh, it's just incredible. I mean, every time it just puts a smile on my face every time I see it. It's incredible.
It's lovely. It's really lovely. And I have to say, I can't help but noticing above it, we've got a flag with the LGBT colours. I feel like that looks like you're making a little poignant sort of comment to the Qataris, perhaps?
Yeah, maybe a little dig towards FIFA and Qatar, just to show that we're all inclusive in England, and no matter who it is, they can play football. Everyone's welcome, it's for everyone, and it's just to give them a little way to say hello.
Now, I know you're a big football fan. I mean, does this World Cup, I mean, we're kind of standing here, I sort of feel like it's starting to rain a little bit. Has it felt like it's had the same momentum that we've had in previous World Cups? Because, of course, we're having this now in winter. It's perhaps we're not having people out in the streets in the same way. I know when the Lionesses were playing, you had so many wonderful activities out in the streets. Do you think has it had the same feeling?
It's growing. It's definitely warming up. I mean, we've had some fantastic games so far during the World Cup, and I think it's only going to get better as it goes on. As long as England can continue and go further as well, I think we're going to do. I think we'll be lively on here. Put it that way.
And how difficult is it organising 400 flags on an estate in November?
In November, it's pretty cold, that's for sure. I mean, I'm still wearing a T-shirt. This is the first time I've got tracksuit bottoms on for a while. But there's 5 of us. We just come together. We was a little bit delayed in doing it this year because we had to concentrate on our Poppy Memorial that we've had done with loads of schools that come round and done it with us. But we had done this in about 4 or 5 days, literally ready for the first game on the Monday. It's 100% not finished yet. We've got one thing left to do, and that's to turn on our Christmas lights later on in the week.
Oh, nice. OK. I have to say, it looks beautiful. It just makes you realise, I mean, flags should just be up in more places just generally. So they just bring so much colour, don't they?
100%. I mean, everyone should fly their flag. Wherever they're from, be proud to put your flag up. It does bring some colour to the estate, and every single time I drive on here, it makes me smile.
And that's I have to say, what's really lovely here on the Kirby estate. Yes, we've got over 400 English flags, St George's Cross, that are all out, but actually lots of people have also put out flags for other nationalities as well, depending on where they're from. So it's really, really inclusive. But I think, hopefully, we can with confidence say most people will be rooting on this estate for England at 7 o'clock tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alice. Alice Porter there at the Kirby estate in Bermondsey. If you were listening on the radio, just picture it's a fantastic wall. It's got the red flag of England with Fran Kirby, the footballer from the Women's Euros. Very realistic. It's almost looks like a photograph on the wall. Brilliant. Have a look at it online. Now then, moving on, the Scottish Government will announce their budget on December the 15th. What's that? Oh, it's nearly 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks away. There are warnings today that if funding for higher education isn't announced, there will be dire consequences for economic and employment opportunities. So joining me now is Alistair Sim, Director at University Scotland, who are one of the organisations that issued this warning. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining me, Alistair. First of all, can you just explain how universities are funded in Scotland?
Well, we get core grant for teaching Scottish domiciled students, and we get core grant for key research facilities and key research staff, and then that enables us to go out and compete for competitively won research grants from UK research and innovation, from the big charities like cancer charities, from international sources, and lever economic growth into Scotland and create the great teaching and research-led jobs that universities provide.
So Nicola Sturgeon's SNP, just correct me if I've got this wrong, but didn't she abolish tuition fees after she came to power in 2007? So do you think they should be reintroduced?
No, what we're asking for is for students and research across colleges and universities to be properly funded. Now, what we've seen, particularly since 2014 or so, is a gradual salami slicing, where this has been in real terms cut back and cut back and cut back. So now we're getting over £2,000 less per student in real terms than we were in 2014. And we're also seeing erosion of our research funding. That's gone down by about 30% since 2014. So we're asking the Scottish Government to make a choice. I mean, if you want opportunities for people, if you want to create economic growth, if you want really great anchor institutions for our cities and regions, you've got to be putting money into colleges and universities. You can't just keep running it down when people have got increased needs after a pandemic for learning and expect to get the same great results. You just can't.
Were there not savings made, Alistair, by universities during the pandemic because so many students were being taught from home, the universities were closed, heating bills would have been down, the usual day-to-day living costs of those particular educational establishments would have been reduced. So maybe there's a saving there somewhere.
Yeah, there were some, there were costs and there were savings during the pandemic. I mean, some staff were on furlough. A lot of staff were working extremely hard, actually translating what had previously been entirely face-to-face courses into something that could actually still be delivered during a pandemic. And that actually took a huge amount of work and a huge amount of staff strain to actually create those resources over the pandemic. But as we come out of it, I mean, learners' needs are increased. I mean, what academics are finding at college and university is that lost learning, that lack of socialization, that lack of the face-to-face opportunity that people had to talk to each other and learn in small groups and in seminars and so on. That's left a legacy. And universities having to put extra time, extra money into actually bringing people on who've had all that severe effect of the pandemic. And, we're asking for, can we just at least get £400 extra per student so we can actually meet those increased needs? Because people are really suffering. People are really feeling that legacy of the pandemic.
OK. All right. Well, as we say, that budget in about 2 weeks' time, we will wait to see whether there is any more funding for Scottish universities. Alistair Sim, Director at University of Scotland, thank you ever so much for bringing us up to speed on that. Do keep your emails coming to me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We've got a Twitter poll up. We are asking whether you support nuclear energy. 95% of you say that you do at the moment. We were talking also about lockdowns just earlier on with our panel. We're going to be having the panel just a little bit later in the show. Rosie says, as to lockdowns, just look at the clip of our present Chancellor and how gloatingly he described how his sister, this is Jeremy Hunt, of course, who lives in Beijing, was met by officials when she returned there, escorted to home, locked in with guards outside. He thought that was the way to go. Dennis has said about Bob Seeley, one of my panellists today, he should either be the Prime Minister or he should join Richard Tice and the Reform Party. And David has been commenting, saying that it's good to see this £700 million of investment in nuclear power station. It's just 20 years too late. Keep your thoughts coming to me, won't you? There is still plenty more to come after this quick break. My panel are going to be going through these stories, including some scary news that a reported 10 million UK workers could be replaced by artificial intelligence within 15 years. I will tell you whether you are likely to be one of them. I'll see you in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Now let me introduce my panel to you this morning. If you're just joining me, where have you been? I'm joined by former Home Office Special Advisor Claire Pearsall, author and academic Joanna Williams and Conservative MP Bob Seeley. Right, Claire, let's talk about this story. Just Stop Oil. Absolute lunatics are going to be causing Christmas chaos around the UK.
I mean, just when you think that we've got this sorted and the police can move them on, they come up with another way to bring chaos to everyday people on the roads, and there isn't anything we can do about it. The group's new MO to this is to walk slowly down a road carrying their signs because they are not blocking the highway and therefore the police have no right to be able to move them on. But this is just going to cause chaos at a time where people are busy, they are trying to live their lives, they are trying to go to work, get to school, get to hospital appointments, and they're just going to be held up. And arguably, it's going to be worse on the environment by people travelling slowly. So I'm just so angry about these people that they are allowed to get away with this time after time.
Bob Seeley, the police have powers already. Why aren't they using them?
I would love the police to be nicking these pain-in-the-neck people more. And actually, I think the best way that we can deal with it is, as members of Parliament, encourage the police to actually act, encourage the police to use their powers, and frankly, us not talking about it, because I hate giving these people publicity for their cretinous extremism. So I almost sort of say, let's not talk about it, because otherwise we're playing their game, and I just hope the police nick them, because frankly, they're a pain in the neck.
But you see, some might say that maybe it's your government isn't doing enough about it. You're not
Agreed.
talking... I mean, look, we all share your concern that actually they are a nightmare, and I don't like to give them the oxygen of publicity, but I've never done a panel show on this channel where anybody is in support of what they're doing.
No, nobody is. So why the police went soft on them last year and letting them roam around London, why we're allowing them to throw paint over stuff, I don't know. Look, I mean, my message is, Suella, that we need to just... It's not so much getting tough on people, it's just using the law, because you've got the right to use the roads, you've got the right to go back to your daily life, you need to get to the hospital or drop the kids at school or get to work. And why these selfish so-and-so have got a right to mess about with your life? I mean, it's a form... OK, this is not just protest, it's a sort of form of organised civil disobedience to try to bring society to a halt, to grind down society. They're not going to win, they're being a pain in the neck en route.
So who isn't empowering the police?
Suella has given new instruction to the police to be tougher.
Isn't this
and
at the same time?
That is now happening, which is why they have moved on to other forms of protest, because they know if they just sit on their backsides on the road, A, they get shouted at by cabbies. Yes. Well done, the cabbies. Yeah. They get shouted at, and they get abused by mums. Well done, the mums. But also, nowadays, they're just getting dragged off the streets. So they're getting dragged off the roads increasingly. So they're now trying to find other silly sort of pain-in-the-neck games in order to try to get their message out there. And actually, it's not going to work.
Joanna, I would love to know how it must feel to be a police officer dealing with these, because this is the same week when we've just heard that there's an anonymous hotline set up where you can anonymously report a police officer for doing something wrong in the workplace. That is I think that's a ridiculous operation. I just don't know why anybody would think that is a good idea to do that to police officers. Why aren't they doing it?
I mean, I do think they're probably a bit worried about their reputation, and if video footage, for example, of them manhandling or treating these protesters in any way roughly was to be widely circulated, I think they would be worried about how that would appear in what they imagine to be is the court of public opinion. I mean, let's not forget that we have had judges, top judges, coming out and being supportive of these people when they are put before courts. You know, and it does seem sometimes as if the weight of the establishment is actually on the side of the protesters. I mean, I do worry, I do wonder about what exactly is it that they want, because it seems that the government is busy pressing ahead with a net zero agenda.
Yes.
I mean, we've got incredible fuel prices.
You've won.
No, because the point about net zero is that we're going to be, talking about nuclear power, etc., we are going to be using oil and gas, especially gas, as a baseline fuel for the next 10, 20 years, regardless of net zero, because to get to net zero, we have to replace gas with nuclear power, which is going to take a good 15 years. So the extremists want us to stop, and indeed the Labour Party, want us to stop using oil and gas by 2030. It's completely irrational. It ain't going to happen, and will collapse our economy and quality of life doing so. But that's what the extremists want. It's not going to work, but we have got to plan for a transition. So that's why we're still going to be using gas in 10 or 15 years. And that's why making North Sea viable is still really important. Otherwise, we're just going to be importing it.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. But the point is that fuel prices are already so high this winter that you've got lots of people who are fearful of putting their heating on at all. And the really tragic consequence of that is people will die as a result of the cold, as a result of damp homes, trying to dry washing inside without a source of heating, condensation, mould, cold. You know, these are recipes for an absolute health crisis.
OK, Jo, and just on that point, there is a £37 billion package of support. There's a lot of money going to make sure that we actually minimise the risks of people being cold and the illnesses that bring on. So just to be fair, there's a lot of time and effort has gone into protecting pensioners, protecting the poorest, protecting the most vulnerable. Rishi was doing that when he was Chancellor, and now Jeremy is
But there is, yes, there is that package in place, but it isn't going to be enough to cover everything. And you've got people who are on dialysis machines, who rely upon those machines to live, whose electricity bill is going through the roof, and the grant that they're going to get isn't enough to cover it. And there is some argument now between government departments as to who is going to be responsible, because the grant from the NHS Trust isn't going to be enough, and the government are saying, but you're already getting money.
And the problem above all of that is actually just keeping the heating on, keeping the electricity on this winter. I mean, we had reports in the news yesterday that the National Grid was about to launch its emergency power, and we haven't even hit December yet. I mean, luckily it didn't come to that, but I actually think, you know, this is 30 years at least of underinvestment. You know, why have we closed down our North Sea gas storage? Why do we not have fracking? Why did that not start again? Why are we importing gas from America at huge cost rather than fracking our own gas? Why are we not building a string of nuclear power stations?
Because our political classes were addicted for the last 20 years to virtue signalling rather than actually long-term planning. This began in 1997 with the new Labour manifesto that said we're not going to do any more nuclear power stations. It takes 10, 15 years to bring nuclear on stream. Why haven't we got enough power now? Because we didn't invest 15, 20 years ago. We then had the coalition with the woolly Lib Dems who didn't want to have nuclear, and all we did was virtue signal about renewables. Let me just finish. We are going absolutely hell for leather to get our offshore renewables. We have the biggest programme in the world apart from China.
Unfortunately, it's not windy today.
Let's part them whether it's windy on any particular day. That's
very important, actually.
No, it is a slight issue, but it's not a core issue. But the core issue is that you still need baseline energy production.
Absolutely.
And it's
Unfortunately, Bob, this virtue signalling is continuing. Rishi Sunak could have relaunched fracking in this country. We do not have fracking. He
fracking is not going to make a difference
the ban on fracking. He could have...
Jo.
Next winter, we could start it now. We could have that...
Fracking, on the scale that the Americans do it, is a decade away, and by then we will, look, in a decade's time, in the medium term, we're going to have potentially a great deal of additional power, because we've got all the renewables happening. We're still going to have gas. We're going to be building nuclear, And what will very likely happen, because it's sort of happening already, is the battery technology that allows us to... Let me just make the point. The battery technology that allows us to store energy for 24, 36, 48 hours during non-windy periods, that is going to be coming on stream in about a decade's time in the northeast and elsewhere. So potentially we have a huge short-term problem caused by virtue signalling political classes over the last 20 years.
My worry is we're going to meet again, Bob, in 10 years' time, and we'll be facing an even bigger problem, and we'll be saying, well, it was because 10 years ago the political class were too busy virtue signalling and they didn't start us off on
you're
fracking
assuming that the way...
But
sorry, you're assuming that fracking's a cure-all. It ain't. What's a cure-all is gas and nuclear, because those are the baselines. And I tell you what is going to be the other game changer, Bev, is going to be, because I was talking to Rolls-Royce about this a few weeks ago, the small nuclear reactor, the small modular nuclear reactors, because if you can build a nuclear reactor in a factory rather than massive thing on site, then you can churn them out much more cheaply, and you'll have lots of small nuclear reactors everywhere, and that becomes a second, after battery power, that becomes a second game changer. I hope we'll meet much earlier than 10 years' time, by the way, Jay.
I might have you back on next week at this rate, you two. But Claire Pearsall, just to let you get a word in edgeways for a moment.
Sorry.
Do you feel... No, Bob, you're here to talk. It's wonderful. But don't you feel that this idea of net zero, we've all just bought into it. I don't feel there was enough discussion as the electorate as to whether this is actually something we even want. I've not heard enough conversation about that.
And I think it's one of these things that is an admirable aim. But when you look at the cost of it, and I think Bob is right, it has been sort of 2 decades worth of inaction by successive governments as to what we do in the future, and everything has been very, very short term. So I think that none of us have ever been asked about net zero. None of us really know what the implications of it are, apart from when you start seeing the levies attached to your electricity and gas bills. And then you start to go, well, hang on a minute, I didn't ask for this, I didn't want this, I do my own things, I try and preserve my energy in a safe way, etc., etc. And people with, you know, electric cars feeling very glum right now, even though they were told it was the right thing to do. So I think, no, we weren't asked about it. We need to not concentrate on it, and we need to look at what we're going to do in 10, 20 years' time. And nuclear is the way forward. And unfortunately, people get very squeamish about it because they look back at a disaster which happened in the 1980s and go, well, that's going to happen on the coast of Norfolk, Suffolk, wherever you have it. And it isn't right. The technology has moved on leaps and bounds. And if we all want to keep our houses lit and heated and keep ourselves moving, then we need power. It is as simple as that.
A referendum on net zero would be a good idea.
Can I just answer Claire's point? Look, the thing that I think we both agree on is just the hysterical language around the COP negotiations in Glasgow, but we're all going to die unless we just all put on hair shirts. I mean, as a Tory MP, I was just thinking, sorry, as a sensible governing party, we should not be using that hysterical language.
I don't disagree with
that is
you.
gone. That is gone. But actually, for a lot of younger people, net zero is important. We have to respect that. And as a general principle, we have got to look after the world better. So that's the way I approach it.
But it is one of those things that you need to be able to have a sensible conversation without somebody coming in and saying, you're killing the planet and we're all going to die.
And what I find really shocking about when we talk about this preserving our planet is how little we hear from MPs about clean water, clean rivers, getting rid of plastics in our oceans.
I'm sorry, OK. In my wonderful Isle of Wight, we have Southern Water's most ambitious clean-up programme, because when the Environment Bill was going through last year, I said to them, I can either sort of gang up on you and just abuse you for the next 10 years or 5 years, however long I'm elected, or you can come and do some good work on the island. We now have the best, we have the model clean-up scheme for our rivers and beaches on the Isle of Wight to make sure the Isle of Wight has the best rivers and beaches in Britain. And that is going to be a model that Southern Water will then take forward everywhere else.
Was that a good news story?
I think
we
probably
actually finished on a little bit of common sense and good news story there. Gosh. Right, we're going to take a quick break. We've got more on the World Cup football after your news with Rosie.
Good morning, it's 11:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The number of people in England and Wales describing themselves as Christian has fallen below half for the first time. The latest data from the Office for National Statistics shows 46.2% identified as Christian when the census was carried out last year. That compares to 59.3% a decade ago. While the number of people who say they have no religion has increased by 12% to just over 37%. The government's given the go-ahead to build the Sizewell C nuclear power plant and committed £700 million to the scheme. The plant, which is being developed by the French energy giant EDF, will be built in Suffolk. Ministers say the move will create 10,000 highly skilled jobs and provide reliable, low-carbon power to the equivalent of 6 million homes for more than 50 years. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, says the announcement means greater energy independence for the UK. A section of the new online safety bill has been removed following criticism by some Conservatives that it posed a risk to free speech. The amendment means big tech, like social media sites, will no longer be required to remove harmful material if it's deemed to be legal. The online safety bill is due to return to Parliament next week after repeatedly being delayed. The Culture Minister, Michelle Donnellan, told GB News the most important part of the bill is strengthening accountability and transparency. 3 refugees have been rescued in Spain after they were discovered clinging to the rudder of an oil tanker. The stowaways were spotted as the vessel anchored in the port of Las Palmas in Gran Canaria. The ship had sailed from Nigeria. It's believed the migrants had survived 11 days at sea. Spain's Maritime Safety and Rescue Society say the individuals have been transferred to port where they're receiving medical attention for mild dehydration. TV, online, DAB+ radio. You're up to date on GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2005 and €1.1574. The price of gold is £1,461.73 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,517 points.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. It is 11:38 on Tuesday. You are watching and listening to Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. Now, tonight is being billed as the Battle of Britain, England versus Wales in the World Cup qualifiers. The Dragons have to beat the 3 Lions to have any chance of making it through to the next stage. I'm excited to be joined head-to-head by 2 former international footballers. We've got Welsh international, as was Neville Southall, and Danny Mills, former England international. Good morning, gentlemen. I'm wishing the day away. Already counting down to 7 o'clock tonight. Danny, let's start with you. Who's going to win?
I'd be very surprised if it's not England. A little bit of a slip-up, not a great performance in the last game against the USA. But realistically, you know, the Welsh players, I think the problem for them is a lot of them haven't had an awful lot of game time. They haven't been particularly fit. I would say, and 3 games in a short space of time for the likes of Gareth Bale, Aaron Ramsey, is going to be very, very difficult for them. England have a stronger squad, strength in depth, and also England, the only reason they won't qualify is if I think they get beaten 5-0 this evening, and that simply is not going to happen.
OK, so Neville Southall, if I can come to you then, do you want to make the case for the Welsh?
Well, why can't we win? I don't understand why we can't win. You know, Gareth Bale, Aaron Ramsey, Joe Allen, they probably realise it's their last World Cup, so I think they'll give everything tonight, and there's no reason why we can't win. I don't think we'll sort of score 4 or 5, but I think we can win the game. You know, we haven't showed ourselves anywhere near what we're capable of. So I think tonight's a night where Gareth and Joe and that need to go out and show the country what they're all about, and show the world what they're all about. And let's few shocks at the moment in the World Cup, so I don't see why we can't win.
OK, well, I was just reading an article that you'd written, Neville, about Gareth Bale, saying that he's the greatest Welsh player ever and could help expose key Jordan Pickford weakness. Is Gareth Bale going to be the key to this match tonight for you?
I think so. I think that if we get free kicks and corners, I think England are vulnerable on set pieces. I do think, if we make Jordan make loads and loads of decisions, then, hopefully he'll get a couple of them wrong. But I do think that Gareth's a big game player. He always has been. He's won everything there is to win. And I think he's sure to be determined to go out on a high note himself, because obviously he wants to enhance his reputation. It's probably his last World Cup. So he will go out with a bang. And with him, any free kick around the edge of the box, he's got a chance of scoring.
Danny, Neville's dreaming, isn't he? They've got no chance, have they, against England?
I mean, Neville's got a point in the fact that this is their swan song. I don't see them qualifying. I don't see them going through. They're not going to beat England 5-0. They could win the game. Of course they could. They might win it, but it would be much closer than that. So this is the last opportunity for Aaron Ramsey, for Gareth Bale, to go out and show on the biggest stage. It's been a long, long time, obviously, since Wales made it to a World Cup finals. So this is an opportunity for them. But I think England will have too much strength, will have too much fitness, able to rotate their squad. Yes, Gareth Bale is a huge threat. We know that. He's arguably the greatest British player or export of all time, that's gone abroad and played. The amount of trophies that he's won, what he's achieved with Wales as well. He hasn't had too much game time. He isn't particularly fit. Can Wales get the ball enough to him? But we saw in the last year, in the Euros, when England played Scotland, Scotland raised their game. They played incredible in that game and got a draw. Wales could do something similar. But I think for Wales to go through after a disappointing, last round of fixtures, I think that's where they blew it.
Just help me understand this, fellas. When you're ex-footballers, where do you watch the match? Are you like the rest of us? Are you sat on the sofa with your family and maybe a glass of wine? Do you make it an event when you're an ex-footballer?
I'm covering it I'm covering it for television in Malaysia. So I'll be sat with Paul Robinson and German Marcus Babbel. So he might be supporting Wales tonight. There's every chance of that. So yeah, no, I'm out working. I'm sure Neville, if he's not working, will be sat at home, hiding behind the sofa as Harry Kane knocks in a hat trick.
Go on, Neville Southall. Where will you be this evening at 7 o'clock?
I'm hoping to be with hundreds of Welsh fans in Cardiff, cheering us on to another victory, because obviously we're going to win, aren't we? Look, I've got my hat and everything. I've got everything.
Oh, brilliant! So where will you be though, Neville? Where will you be with your hundreds of fans?
In the tram shed in Cardiff.
Okay.
It's a really good event, to be fair, so it'd be great.
Okay, Neville, I want to see you in your Welsh hat. You're not getting away that easily. Come on, I want to see this hat. They are a bit ridiculous. I've seen them on the telly a bit this morning. Well, there you go. That's very flattering. That's lovely. Yeah. If you're listening on the radio, you're missing a man in a red and a yellow and a green hat, a bucket hat, these famous Welsh bucket hats. Danny, if I can just come to you for a minute. We're living in very miserable times, aren't we, at the moment? Everyone's talking about this cost of living crisis we can't even turn on our electricity bills. What does football do you think, to unite people and to raise the mood, even just for a moment? It's the bread and circuses distraction for those masses, isn't it?
Well, I think in England, in Great Britain and the UK, football has always been a working class sport. That's always brought people together. It's a focal point. We saw, during the Euros, we've seen in the past where Wales had fantastic success in the Euros and World Cups, how, suddenly everybody comes together, you get that party atmosphere, and people get excited about it. It breaks down barriers. And I think, this is why we get this constant messaging. There's been issues, obviously, with Wales fans wearing their hats and supporting the LGBTQ plus community. Football, there are no barriers in football. Football is for everybody. And I think that's what you see, wherever you be tonight, wherever you're watching it, whether that be in a bar, in a pub, in a restaurant, or standing in a shop window, whatever it might be, watching a screen. Everybody's interested in the football. Everybody's interested in the results, and I think that's always been what's great about football. It's the simplest game ever. Jumps for goalposts. That's all you need: a makeshift goal and a ball. That's it. And sometimes you don't even need a ball. You can make whatever up, and I think that's the beauty of football, and that's why the World Cup will always be the biggest event in the world.
Let me just get score predictions from you both then, please. Neville Southall, first of all, you. What's your score line at the end of the night?
2-1 to Wales.
Right, Danny Mills?
3-1 England.
OK, right. Well, tomorrow morning I'll be announcing which of you got it right, and maybe we'll get you back on to talk about your psychic powers. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Enjoy the match wherever you're going to be tonight. Really appreciate your input here this morning on GB News. Now, sticking with the World Cup, one village on the border between England and Wales will be torn over their allegiance in the home nations derby. Our reporter, Jack Carson, went to find out more.
Last time England and Wales came up against each other competitively, it was an injury-time goal from Daniel Sturridge that gave the Three Lions bragging rights. Now it's match day for the two sides in Qatar. The people watching the game in Llanymynech will have a different experience to most.
When England play Wales at a major tournament, it's always going to be a tight affair. But in this village, things can get a little bit too close for comfort, when right now I'm in England, but one step puts me in Wales.
The border of the two nations zigzags down the main road through the village, and the owner of this pub has Wales right outside his window. He says the World Cup has been a mixed experience.
It's been great. The atmosphere has been fantastic for the English games and for the Welsh games. It's been a little bit different, obviously being a Winter World Cup. We would normally have obviously the doors open, everyone outside and music playing. Plus obviously with the games being at 10 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the moment. Again, unless people are booking time off work, it's become very difficult. But if anything, what it's probably done is it made it a little bit more intimate, where everyone's inside. It's a little bit, we're shutting the doors, getting the heating on and making it nice and warm. And it's really helped to, obviously, with the atmosphere. And like I said, is for the 4 games that we've had so far with the 2 English and the 2 Welsh, it's been fantastic.
Not everyone in this village is as keen to engage with Qatar 2022. The owner of the village shop on the Wales side says the controversy around the tournament has clouded his support for the home teams.
Where it's being held, the lack of women's rights, the slavery allegations, the homophobia, the lack of basic human rights in Qatar, really. So it's been a bit difficult sort of getting behind it, but we'll support the nations. I suppose we support England and Wales here, but,
This is a close-knit community, and a home nations derby won't split this village into harsh rivals. But after their loss to Iran, it's going to be hard for Wales to reach the next stage.
Wales have to beat England and hope other results go their way for them to make the knockout stages. Otherwise, the sun could well be setting on their World Cup tournament. This one, though, nobody can predict because it all happens on the pitch. It's England versus Wales tonight, and anything could happen.
Jack Carson, GB News.
Right, on the sofa now, I am back here, pleased to be joined by former Home Office Special Advisor Claire Pearsall, author and academic Joanna Williams, and Conservative MP Bob Seeley. Now, if you were watching yesterday, you'd have seen I did a big, long interview with Miriam Cates, MP, and she feels very strongly about the Online Harms Safety Bill to protect children from pornography access to pornographic images. There's been a slight amendment, Jo. This is all over the place today. What have they changed?
Well, the headline news here is that they're going to axe the obligation on tech companies to remove what's come to be known as legal but harmful content. I actually think that's slightly misleading because the regulation to keep that restriction will be in place for under 18s. So there's going to be a lot tighter age limit. Quite how that will come into effect, I don't know. But there's going to be much tougher age restrictions on social media, access to social media sites. And tech companies will have to make sure that children are not able to access things like pornography, images of self-harm, that could be harmful content, whereas adults can, because that's been the dispute, as you know, over the past 4 years. How do you protect free speech for adults and yet safeguard children? And that's a complete conundrum. My concern is that this still tilts the balance too far towards protecting children and doesn't put in enough safeguards for free speech. The fines that are set to be put on tech companies are so massive. My fear is that they just take a sledgehammer, they get the bots kind of doing this censorship for them, and they're going to err on the side of caution, err on the side of removing content online and stopping free speech, in fact, censoring.
Claire, what do you think? It's a very difficult balance to get right, isn't it? The idea that they could take down legal but harmful material.
Yeah.
Who decides what is harmful?
And that's my main concern, is that who's going to sit there and judge what is legal but harmful, because everybody's going to have their own line as to what they think it is. And I agree with Joanna that I think that we are now handing this responsibility pretty much back to all of the social media companies who are going to err on the side of caution and they're going to be so risk averse, and any freedom of speech is going to be deemed to be harmful to somebody. And I think that stifles opinions, it stifles debate, and that's something that we can do without. I don't think anybody would suggest that we want our children looking at indecent images. However, in none of this conversation is what the parent is meant to do. Because surely we're the ones that give our children access to the internet, we give them a mobile phone, a tablet, whatever it is. It is our responsibility at the end of the day to stop that content coming through.
Bob, as an MP, this is the kind of bill that would keep you awake at night. It's been in and out of Parliament for 4 years. Are you quite relieved it's not your responsibility to make these decisions?
Yes, Bev, great point. I mean, for people like me, I'm concerned about lots of different aspects of this bill, but is this something I've devoted a lot of my attention to? No. Joanna, free speech, it's under attack all the time at the moment. Free speech means offending some people, and the problem is there are too many people who say, oh, I'm offended, therefore we need to shut down free speech. On the other hand, I'm a massive fan of Miriam, who is undoubtedly one of our best and most capable MPs. She's a fabulous woman.
100%.
And if Miriam likes something, I tend to think, actually, I trust what Miriam is saying, especially on the kids' stuff, because she is, you know, a proper conservative on these issues. There is a tension here, and my worry is you get the law of unintended consequences, that you think you're doing some good work, and in fact you're going to damage free speech, or you won't protect children enough. So it's something that I follow, I try to understand, I worry about the implications, and actually I'm really quite conflicted about the various elements.
But I do think Claire's absolutely right about whose responsibility is it to be protecting children in our society today, and whose responsibility is it more broadly to be introducing children to ideas around gender and racism and all kinds of contested ideas. And I think parents are being written out of the equation more and more. And I think we do need a real cultural conversation about children and tech and the role of parents.
Absolutely. And on that, Bob, this story that you've got here about rising childcare costs on women's careers and the tax relief might be available.
I was talking to one of your one of the guests, I think, on a previous show, Aria, this morning, and she was talking about how the planning system is hurting childcare costs on the margins. I am one of the people, along with Theresa Villiers, leading the planning rebellion, trying to get government to have a community-led, regen-led, better planning system. And so I want to, hopefully Ari's going to be contacting me later today, and I'm going to take this up because I think this is a really important issue. We need to make sure that actually our childcare costs are not the most expensive in Europe, because it's holding women back. We need to be growing the economy. We need to be giving everyone great life chances and opportunities. And if there are things that I don't understand, because I'm not a woman, then I need to understand them, and I need to understand these issues of childcare costs better.
Isn't the problem as well, though, I'm just going to come to you, Claire, isn't the problem that childcare shouldn't just be a woman's issue.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Out there, Bob.
Yeah,
No,
and I think that's half the problem. Is that it's always the women who get lumbered with all of this, and I say lumbered. It's not, and I'm not blaming you for this whatsoever.
can
If
be.
you have no experience.
No, the reason I said that is because I haven't got kids still practicing. I haven't got kids yet. Would like them, but
it is, yes.
therefore I'm
it
not as informed as I should be.
disproportionately hits women harder. And we know this. We've gone through the childcare system. It is really, really difficult. It is expensive. It's not necessarily at the times that you need. I remember that panic of running back from work to the station to get back before I was going to get charged £5 a minute for being late. And I understand why they do it, because, you know, their time has to be paid for as well. But it is so difficult and it is so demoralising when you come to the end of the month and you've worked extremely hard, you've put your child in childcare and you come away with £20 to your name, and that is it.
I just want, before we get to the end of the show, you've been so busy getting in touch with me, and I'm so sorry. I've had such a great panel today. I've barely got to your messages. A lot of you getting in touch about the 4-day week. This has really wound you up, the idea that 100 businesses are normalising the 4-day week. Barry has said this will mean less gridlock, less energy costs, more money spent on socialising on a 3-day weekend. And Rob has said it's just laziness brought on by lockdowns. Trying to get hold of customer services at telecoms will reduce to 2 to 3 days. SMEs won't be able to afford it. Mac, supported by Labour, he says, who gave us open borders and kids hiding in universities. Why would anyone apart from a lazy person listen to them? More and more and more. We might pick that up tomorrow as well. We've been running a poll, of course, asking you whether you support nuclear energy after Grant Shapps' announcement today that we're going to spend £700 million on improving the power station that we already have at Sizewell. 95% of you agree with that. You think that nuclear power is a good idea. Right, we've come to the end of our show. Coming up next is GB News Day with Mark Longhurst. I'm Bev Turner. Thank you ever so much for joining me, and thank you for my wonderful panel. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Hello again, I'm Ada McGivern from the Met Office. Certainly been a gloomy start to the day for many, with extensive low cloud, mist and fog. Visibility slowly improves today, but for many it is a dull day. But it's a dry day. A weather front out in the west being held back by a ridge of high pressure. But it's that ridge of high pressure with its light winds that has led to that extensive low cloud, mist and fog development overnight. And some stubborn fog patches will remain into the afternoon for the central lowlands, Vale of York, Welsh Marches, for example, and across much of England into East Wales, southern Scotland, extensive low cloud and mistiness. But around the fringes of the UK, west and north in particular, some sunshine coming through, and 10 or 11 Celsius at best, particularly towards the southwest, mid to high single figures, where we've got the mist, low cloud and fog. Some showers will be close to the far southeast through the day and overnight, but for the vast majority it's staying dry for the time being. And again, overnight we'll see that low cloud, mist and fog developing. So once again, a misty start to the day, some poor visibility on the roads first thing. I think northern Scotland, West Wales, southwest England, most likely to see a bright start, but with a touch of frost here. And for Northern Ireland, here the cloud will thicken through the morning with some outbreaks of rain edging in from the west. Not a great deal of rain, but rain nevertheless. A keen breeze coming up from the south here. 10 or 11 Celsius, 12 Celsius in the far southwest, but for many where we keep the extensive low cloud through the afternoon, temperatures at mid to high single figures. Into Wednesday evening, again we've got that extensive low cloud. I think it will lower further through the night on Wednesday night, and that means Thursday will start off with widespread fog, some difficult driving conditions with very poor visibility about, but brighter skies arrive on Friday and Saturday, albeit with lower temperatures.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip
of the iceberg. And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as